afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I know you didn't come to see me, you came to see Karen, but it's okay. We want to welcome you to the Biddy Mason Center. Today is a very important day because we have a chance to really talk about foster care and what it's like. Frankie Ross is our moderator. Frankie, you are now on.
You know, it's National Foster Care Month, which is a time to recognize a part that we all can play, enhancing the lives of our children and our youth in foster care. And the purpose of the National Foster Care Month is it's an ongoing process that continues to evolve based on the needs of the times. And they're always evolving and always changing, as we know. The foster care is a part of the constellation of services provided to children and families. And the intent of foster care is to provide a safe environment for our kids, our children, our youth who can't live with their families, be it temporary or not. And I got that directly from the Children's Bureau. And LA County is, I didn't know this, is probably on the flyer that you may or may not have seen. LA County is home to the largest foster care population in the nation. Over 30,000 kids, 30,000 children are in the system, and African Americans are represented disproportionately in the LA County foster care system. This panel and audience will explore the structure and procedures of the Department of Children and Family Services, the current legislation and protocols, and how the public can impact and improve the lives of current and former foster youth. Now our panel. She's a 6-term Congresswoman of District 37 and is currently running for mayor of Los Angeles, and with our support, we can make that happen. Put your hands together. Congresswoman Karen Bass. He's the acting director of the Bureau of Specialized Services for the Department of Children and Family Services, the DCFS. Ladies and gentlemen, nice round of applause, Reggie Carter. Yatina, or friends call her Yati. She's an educator, a teacher for LAUSD, LA Unified School District. She's also a Fulbright scholar. She stepped in graciously for Sherry Walker, who couldn't be here today. Put your hands together, a nice round of applause. Yatina Soto. And he is currently a PhD candidate studying at UCLA. Very smart man. Smarter than me. Nice round of applause, Mr. Demonte Thompson. Let's start with the question, the process that it takes to be placed in foster care. Thank you. Well, what is the process? And this is for Karen Bass and Reggie Carter.
So we're a residual system, meaning something has to happen first. Some kind of child abuse and or neglect must take place. A referral would then come into our, what we call child protection hotline, which I'm now the acting deputy director, not director. I don't want anybody calling the department saying he said he was the director. I'm the acting deputy director for the Bureau of Specialized Response Services. And within that is a child protection hotline, which is when you call that 1-800 number, it's going to them. They then will take the information, screen the call. There's a number of tools that have to be utilized to assess the situation. And then we will then take a referral. And that part of that assessment is making sure, see if that referral is going to be a 5-day response or an immediate response. And sometimes there are expedited responses where police might be calling in and we're going out within 2 hours. But knowing that, we don't take everything that comes in. For example, in April, there were over 6,000 calls that came in for abuse and or neglect. 4,400 were received for in-person responses. Over 2,200 were evaluated out. And when we're evaluating out, though, we are trying to still link to services. So if you just come in because you want counseling or you need a particular linkage, we will try to do that with one of our community partners. But if not, we go out and investigate the situation, and it reaches a point where there is a safety issue, meaning that child is in danger right now and we have to detain. That is how the child might come into the system, where we would then detain. It would go to court on certain allegations. It would then determine whether that was going to be upheld, and then the parent will receive what we call family reunification services. But there are other services as well, such as voluntary services that come into play, where you would still come into care, but it's on a voluntary basis for 3 to 6 months, where we provide services to hopefully keep that child at home and or get them back home very quickly. But that is the quick and dirty, without taking up a lot of time, of how a child comes into our care and to our attention.
Congresswoman?
You hear me?
The process?
Not sure if this, oh yeah, you can hear me now, right? Okay, great. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to see everyone. And thank you all for the work that many of you do day in and day out. And I know that there's plenty of experts here in the process. Let me just mention a couple of things. Structurally, the way the system has been set up nationally is that in order for the family to really receive services, you had to take the kid away. And I know LA County, of course, has been on the forefront of not doing that. But you know, speaking about it nationally. And so we're trying to change the system. Legislation was passed a few years ago that would actually allow for children's services around the country to try to keep the families together and to provide services, because the number one reason why children are removed is because of neglect, not necessarily physical or sexual abuse. And you guys who work in this day after day, please correct me if things have changed. But a lot of times the neglect is related to poverty, substance abuse, or mental illness. So why would you take a child away? Why wouldn't you try to address the family as a whole? So that's kind of the direction that things are going. And the legislation that was passed to allow for services to be provided up front and to keep the families whole, in my opinion, is inadequate. It was a first step. It's called Families First. We need families second and third, because the way the legislation is set up, you get 12 months. So I'll give you 12 months of substance abuse or mental health care. And then after that, then what? So, but you know, the way things change, you do it incrementally. But oftentimes what happens is that people forget then to come back and do step 2.
This is kind of uncomfortable. For kids that are placed in foster care, you know, I've known a few. They're uncomfortable about talking about it, how they got there, and pretty much how they're living day to day. And what are the initial steps of being placed in foster care? Maybe you can weigh in.
I just want to say I am a bigger fan than I was before, because she, Miss Karen Bass, Senator Karen Bass, I'm sorry, Congresswoman, right? I'm sorry. She just talked about everything that I have in my notes. So I am a former foster youth myself, and she basically hit it right on the head. I was removed from my home based on neglect. My mother has a mental illness and she was impoverished. And due to circumstances that were beyond her control, we were homeless. So I ended up in McLaren Hall. And if some of you guys know about the history of McLaren Hall, it was a very chaotic and traumatic experience. And it was supposed to be a temporary placement. And it ended up being 9 months, from what I remember, 9 months. Exactly what she said. When I was removed from my home, me and my younger brother, my mother lost her support that she was dependent on. And instead, those monies were transferred to, I went to different group homes and different foster homes, and some of them were good and some of them weren't. But it's actually strange to me that the parents, the birth parents, the actual parents, received less monies than the foster parents did. So it's fiscally irresponsible, that system. So I just wanted to say that I totally agree with that. And that's what I wrote down, actually, that providing wraparound services for families in cases of neglect or poverty instead of, physical or sexual emotional abuse. And we live in Los Angeles. It's a very expensive place. So in my situation, I know that my mom was working very hard. She tried to provide for us, but she wasn't receiving services that she needed. So I would say how we can make it better is by providing those supportive services like Ms. Karen Bass just suggested, and for the parents and also for the youth. Thank you.
DeMonte.
First and foremost, I'd like to just thank everyone for being here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, something I do research on, something I have lived experience with. But for me, similar to my colleagues, and just as Karen Bass mentioned, neglect is oftentimes conflated with poverty. And so if you're poor and sort of seeking additional resources and help with DCFS, sometimes it could be a Trojan horse where you may get entrapped or ensnared into this system that no longer providing you with supports, but are now taking your family, your children away. And so there's things in which that we should do. For me personally, I was able to stay with my family. Luckily, my great uncle, he was 70 years old when he took my twin brother and I into his home. And we were able to stay in our community. We were able to see other Black people in our community who were in school, who were just good role models. And we weren't taken outside of our community and placed in different cultures and expected to do other things. And so for me, I think kinship care, relative caregiving might be the solution. Let's provide resources to other family members who have the capacity to be able to support their family members. And don't just give the monies, as you mentioned, to other folks who are in other parts of the community who may not look like or come from the child's background.
So I'm actually glad to hear that. I'm actually glad to be here to say that there are some changes that have and still need to take place. We don't do a good job raising kids as a department. We've been saying that for probably the last 15 to 20 years that I've been around, 27 years almost, but we know that kids that grow up in our system do not do well. So we actually place with relatives about 70% of the time, meaning your real relatives, quote unquote, as well as fictive kin, those non-related extended family members. That is the first option. Unfortunately, it does not always work. And so we then have to look at other options. But the first choice, at least now, and I apologize for you guys for when you came, it wasn't there all the time. For you, it was, DeMonte, but in your situation, it was not. But that is the first option, is we're trying to place with family whenever possible. Again, safety is key. Still expecting even other families to do certain things just like anybody else. But that is the first option. So change is happening. It is happening slowly. But there is still a lot of room for growth. But I am happy to say that there is some movement in a positive direction in that aspect.
Just by show of hands, how many people in the audience has been placed in foster care or know someone that's been in foster care? Okay. Wow. Okay. And Reggie, this is a question for you. What are the initial steps of a child being placed in foster care?
So the initial steps, if you're in a situation in which you're looking to possibly have to detain a youth and bring him into care, as you're beginning your investigation and you're coming to that conclusion, staff should start looking at family members, potential family members immediately, getting live scans done, asking both sides of the family. We tend to focus on the maternal side of the family, but through our Father Strong efforts and things we've been trying to do over the last about 7 to 10 years, we want to make sure we include also fathers and paternal family as well. Not always the easiest thing to do because families don't get along or they don't want to give you the information. But as a social worker, as a representative of the department, we have to dig a little deeper, ask those secondary questions, speak to people alone so that you can get as much support for the youth and the families as possible. Just because a child is placed with maternal aunt doesn't mean that paternal grandma can also be a support and part of that child's team or that family's team. But the initial steps are you have to get live scanned. You have to be willing, of course, to take the child in. Their home has to meet a certain standard that came in with ASPA, Adoption Safe Families Act from many, many years ago. Basically, a relative has to meet the same standard of care as any foster parent at this point in time. Now, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, we're going to finagle that a little bit, so to speak, meaning that we understand it's grandma. So we're going to give grandma some deference and extra support to help her to be able to take that child in. There are goods and services that we can put in place to help that relative be able to bring the child in. Can't get them a new house, but might be able to help with certain bills, might be able to assist in other areas that will support that relative taking in that child. And unfortunately, again, sometimes we cannot find relatives initially. And so then you would have to place in foster care the least restrictive home possible, meaning you're starting with relatives, foster family, agency. And then if you have to go up to a higher level of care, then so be it. But we're trying at all stops to place with family whenever possible.
So I asked to respond to that too, and this is no reflection on the county at all, because a lot of the rules don't emanate from the county. They emanate from the state or from the federal government. And then people pass these laws and they don't think about the unintended consequences. So, I know that a relative has to meet the same standard as a foster parent, but sometimes it's like if you only have a 2-bedroom house and you have 4 grandkids to come in, you know what I mean? And I appreciate you saying trying to be flexible, but you're bound by certain rules that, so you're sleeping 2 kids to a bed. So, when I grew up, my 3 brothers slept in one room. Since I was the only girl, I had no room. But I you know what I mean? And even with the life scan. So I'm trying to work on legislation right now that says you might have an old conviction. Because I've talked to grandmoms in their 70s who had a conviction when they were either in their late teens or early 20s, and then they don't qualify. Because policymakers make these decisions in a vacuum, which is why one of the things that I do, and Demonte has been a part of it, the National Foster Youth Institute, is try to bring people with lived experience into Congress to talk to their congressperson so that they don't do stupid stuff. The other one is like the time limit. You have 18 months or so to reunify. Well, some states like Alabama, for example, shortened it to 12 months. So if you go to prison on a marijuana charge and you're in jail for 2 years, you could lose your kid because you couldn't meet the timeline. So there's a lot of policies that make your life miserable as a provider and really work they're counterproductive. At least and I remember back in the day when we were first starting to push relatives, the view was the apple didn't fall far from the tree. And why are you asking us for money? We had no problem giving money to strangers to take care of you, but we're not going to give money to the 70-year-old grandma who's on a fixed income.
And that leads into the disproportionality issue. And so, again, there are strides being taken as we, with our ERDD component, eliminating racial disparity and disproportionality, something been going on for about 15 to 16 years now. Understanding that these laws, how we feel, our own bias plays a part in some of our kids coming into care, particularly our African-American kids being overrepresented in care. I can't tell you how many times there are options, though, to place with grandma who had a hit from 50 years ago. I might have to sign my life away as well to sign off on that letter that is exempting them and saying I'm okay with this. As a regional administrator, I've done that a number of times. Workers have done that because we understand, people make mistakes. But she hasn't done anything for the last 45 years. So why are we holding her accountable for that? So we are, again, trying to be more reasonable than we have been in the past. Hopefully that is what's going on across the board. I cannot speak 100% for every person in the department. But if they come to my attention, if they come to a regional administrator's attention, I am hoping and I'm almost sure that they're going to be reasonable in those situations. My reasonable might be a little different than someone else's, but again, I'm saying all that to say that there are strides being made to offset some of those ills that have taken place in the past.
DeMonte, Yatina, maybe you can answer this one. Just some of the experiences that you may have that you went through when you were removed from your home.
Yeah. So my situation is a little bit different because I was placed with kinship, with my kin, my great uncle. So I wasn't necessarily taken out from my home. My family actually lived there as well. But then, my family was always around. My mom and dad was always around the neighborhood. So I had a unique experience in foster care. But it doesn't mirror. When I was born, I was placed into foster care. And so there's tests that actually happens when a mother gives birth. There are tests with for drugs and anything else like that happens. And then if there are drugs present, then the child is taken immediately. And so Dr. Dorothy Roberts talks about this in her new book, Torn Apart. And she speaks about the ways in which Black mothers are oftentimes sort of surveilled and policed and sort of provided scrutiny from doctors who may be biased. And as you know, 53% of Black children will experience CPS investigations before they turn 18. And so this is not something that is just coincidental. This is not something that, Black people are, they need to be live with other families. No, this is something that's systemic. This is something that needs to be sort of, I'm calling out the elephant in the room about the disproportionality. We have to be intentional about the ways in which that we provide support to Black families, particularly Black women, Black single mothers, because there's a pathologization of the poor that exists, not only in LA, but across the nation. And if we don't address this, we'll continue to get further and further away from the goals at which we set as a county and as a nation.
Yatina?
I totally agree with all the other panelists. I will say in my lived experience, I unfortunately heard a lot of bad things, negative comments from my social worker about my mother. And it gave me a kind of a complex about myself. And I've noticed through the Fulbright fellowship that I'm doing and completed actually, that Native communities, Indigenous communities, Aboriginals, they went through this similar experience where their children were stolen from them. And I think that a lot of times we look at, something happening across the globe and say, oh, wow, that's horrible. But that's happening in our own backyard. So I think it comes from a place where, some people may think, oh, kind of like DeMonte just said, they need to live with someone else. They need to learn these different kind of morals, or they need to be they need to be taught a certain kind of way, right? So I think that it's useful to think of it kind of the way you're saying, as a protective measure, that we need to protect Black women to prevent this type of episode, because it's happening across the globe. So we can see this is a behavior and this is a systematic type of activity. So just like I said, based on my own experiences, there was just a lot of negative comments from caseworkers and just different people who are in charge of my care about my mother's behaviors and the way that she presented herself. And I think that was something that was biased, and a lot of it had to do with racism.
How long were you in the system?
I believe for about 6 to 7 years, and I was exited care. Back then, it wasn't, we didn't have these supports that we have now. A lot of the kids that participate with the Biddy Mason program, they do transitional support. We didn't have that. So we were just kind of like exited.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Similar to my colleague here. I went through care from when I was a baby all up until 18. So I stayed in foster care with my great uncle until 18, and then I emancipated at 18. Back then, they didn't have extended foster care where you can stay between 18 and 21. But I was fortunate, and my uncle, he was very sagacious in the way that he sort of maneuvered foster care, because he was getting funds from the government and some minor funds to support us. But he also knew that if we were in foster care, we would get educational support. And so if he had adopted us, it would be a different situation. And so in some cases, and this is why I do the work that I do, in some cases, foster care, regardless of the harm and many of the confusions that come about being split with your family, the resources that come with educational support is not highlighted from social workers. It's not highlighted from folks who are in the system as it should be. And I'm here to tell you all that if you do it right, if you're a young person who experienced foster care, you can get paid to go to college. And you can get paid for your undergrad, sometimes for your master's. And there's independent living programs that my brother will probably speak on a little bit later. But I was able to take advantage of many of those resources, got a computer, got, books and everything. I wasn't playing no games. So my uncle said, a closed mouth don't get heard. And y'all know the rest. Closed mouth don't get fed.
That's right. Reggie?
Yes, he's the extended foster care. Unfortunately, that wasn't existent then, as a result of AB 12. For kids that are 18 to 21, they can continue to receive services, whether it be transitional services, a supervised independent living plan in which they can receive housing and funds to go along with that to support kids that are in care after the age of 16. Can also receive CHAPE monies. I think I don't know what it is now, $5,000 a year. Oh, $5,500 now, excuse me. As well as, and as a social worker, I used to have to tell kids, one of the places I worked in was called Rites of Passage. And some people here know about that. I know, Franco, you know about that, under Ron Johnson, rest his soul. And basically, if I came to your house and said I want the Reginald Carter case, you were going to stop, not your house, but your office. You were going to stop whatever you were doing to give me that case, because it was probably one of your worst cases. We literally recruited. But what I used to have to tell some of my youth is, I don't care if you hate me, hate the department, take advantage of it for what it's worth. Get that education, get that high school diploma, because then that opens up, or a GED even, because that opens up other doors. Let's use the system for what it is. Take advantage of what I can give you. You don't have to like me, but take advantage of it. So the ILP services, the transitional housing, a lot of that depends on that high school diploma or that GED, at least it used to. And so there are services out there. And like he said, there's advantages and disadvantages for adoption and legal guardianship, depending on what age that takes place. But as a social worker, it's our job to explain that to you. As a caregiver, as a youth of a certain age, that is our task to do that. So I'm taking a few notes here so I can take it back to my colleagues so we can spread it throughout our offices to make sure there are certain things that we're doing. Because like I said, while we're doing better, there's a whole lot of growth to be done. So that's about all.
The mother, you talked about living with your. Oh, I'm sorry, Congresswoman.
Yeah, let me just add in. Unfortunately, I have to leave. I have to go. It's campaign season. I have to go do a candidates forum. And I tell you, I would so much rather be here. I would to have to go do that. But I just really want to, to you two on the panel, DeMonte and Yati, we need to give them a round of applause for their accomplishments. My goodness. It's so exciting to see what you have achieved and all. It's a real inspiration, especially to others that are still in the system. And even though I'm, not going to be going back to Congress, I've worked on this issue for many, many years. I'll never stop working on it because I think it's one of the fundamental injustices in our system. You mentioned the Native American kids, with our new Secretary of the Interior. I don't know if you saw what she's doing, but now she's uncovering the history of how they took away Native American children because they wanted to essentially beat the Indian out of them. But there is just, hundreds of years of history in this country of breaking up families. And it didn't just drop, out of the sky, and demonizing families as opposed to policing families, as opposed to helping families instead of, penalizing them. But I just want to thank you all for the work that you do. And Mr. Carter, I know you're on the front line every day, and DCFS is often beat up, but not acknowledged for the lives that you impact and save. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today.
Thank you, Congresswoman Karen Bass. DeMonte, you talked about pretty much what I was going to ask about kin care, and because you were raised by a relative. You got anything more to add or expound on just the advantages of just growing up with a relative and being just close to family?
Yeah, I like to mention one thing, and I'm conducting research on the educational outcomes of foster youth from preschool to college. And what I found is that young people who live outside of their family unit, their relatives or their community, oftentimes have to face an accumulation of disadvantages, compounded sort of oppression, in ways that I'm describing anti-Blackness. So if they're living with another family, and you probably saw this on the show called Colin Kaepernick's show on Netflix, Colin in Black and White, and he was adopted by this white family, and he wanted some braids, and his parents were like, don't do that. And they wanted him to play baseball, and he wanted to play football. So in many ways, oftentimes you are sort of steered away from your own culture, away from who you are, away from what you can be. And so, and led in places that you may not want to go, because of bias, because of anti-Blackness. And oftentimes it's not recognized or seen. And so for me, I was fortunate to be able to stay in my community, be connected still to my parents, regardless of what DCFS said. They came around, was cutting grass, and I'm saying hello. They bought me a bike, and I'm still connected to my family, regardless of the struggles that they're experiencing in that time. And so for me, I think there needs to be a more concerted effort in ensuring that Black families not only stay together, right, with relative and kinship care, but are connected to their communities in real, tangible ways. The music, the art, the food, because oftentimes you can sort of be snatched away, as Dorothy Roberts puts it, torn apart from your family and placed somewhere else where you don't have a sense of identity, placed somewhere else where you're surveilled, placed somewhere else where you put in a position where you can't succeed.
Reggie, this is for you. Protocols of foster care. 18 is pretty much the cutoff. And but how can the support continue after 18?
So it used to be the cutoff.
21 now.
It's now 21. Mm-hmm. At 18, we have, you have AB 12, which means that youth can become a quote unquote non-minor dependent. They're adjudicated, their old case is closed, and they become a non-minor dependent, which means they can almost do whatever they want to do. However, they still have the support of our department, whatever that happens to be, whether it's they want to continue with counseling, school, they still can get the IOP services, housing, and other aspects like that. But also, even if you're in legal guardianship, many of our relatives do not want to adopt a child, because adoption means that the parental rights of the biological parent are severed. They are terminated, and grandma, auntie, uncle becomes the parent. Many relatives don't want to do that, so they opt into legal guardianship. Now, on paper, not on paper. Legally, legal guardianship lasts until age 18. However, if a youth meets certain criteria, going to school, trying to finish up vocational or high school, there's about 2 other ones that I cannot recall right now, I apologize. They can get extended services as well, where the support financially will continue, as well as the other services of the department. So there are a number of different avenues for additional supports for our youth. Additionally, there are many community partners out there. You heard me mention Right Way Foundation, Shields for Families, our ILP services. There are kinship support services. There are a number of services out there that are for caregivers and for youth that can extend beyond the age of 18 up until age 21. And then after that, there are some as well. Maybe not as many, but they're out there. So again, it wasn't always like this, but it's a little bit better than what it was previously.
Some of the pitfalls and negative challenges and experiences of children in foster care. Yatina, you talked about some of the stuff that you experienced, and maybe you can weigh in too, Reggie and DeMonte, if you experienced.
I agree with all the panelists. Basically, you just feel very disconnected. I was moved to many different homes, many different group homes, and every time that you move to a new placement, you have to learn new rules. You have to new attitudes, either positive or negative, and it is traumatic for the child. And some of the experiences that they might, that might negatively affect them also is like biases and preconceived notions of like teachers. Oh, that's a foster youth. Oh, they're going to be trouble. And I've heard that with amongst my colleagues. And that's one of the reasons that I decided to be forthright and just start telling people, I'm a former foster youth. So you shouldn't say that about them. They could be anything they want to be if we support them. So I think, we have to provide services. And I'm so glad about the transitional services now because I didn't have that. And it was it was very hard. My laughter is a coping mechanism. But I'm really happy and so excited to meet all the young people that come to the Biddy Mason House and know that they're being supported through these programs. I met a few girls who have supportive housing, and it's just so amazing because in my situation, it was a severe struggle. There's something that I wanted to talk about. So I did eventually apply to school, and I was in university, Mount St. Mary's University, which is an amazing supportive community. Love it. It's an all women's college in Los Angeles. And sometimes I wouldn't have enough food. I didn't have any sheets when I moved into the dorm. And one of the other girls said, "You don't have any sheets in your bed?" I said, "Oh, couldn't get any." So I was sleeping on my jacket, and she took her sheets off her bed and gave them to me. So, honey. But I do want to say that I remember when that bill passed, one of the financial aid counselors, she was a Black woman as well. She pulled me out and she talked to me. She was like, "Why didn't you apply for this Chafee grant?" I was like, "I didn't even know about it." I had no idea that these monies were available. So I was able to get the Chafee grant. And then from then on, I had extra funding. I had extra money. I was able to buy myself things, buy things that I needed. So I think some of the challenges that foster youth go through, it's just like little things that other people wouldn't even consider. Like I moved into the dorm with no sheets and I was sleeping on my jacket for like a month, so just things like that. That's what I want to share.
Reggie, sex trafficking. What are just some of the things that you've seen personally with kids that have experienced and gone through that?
That's a doozy right there. Sex trafficking, CSEC, which actually I have units under me now that deal specifically with that endeavor. A lot of times it's about the trauma that they've experienced, whether by someone they know, whether family, whether getting caught up in the life, trying to seek acceptance a lot of times. And it's not just a female issue, male and female, familial and non-familial. People are taking advantage of our youth. It is easier said than done to assist and reach a youth to help them out of that quote unquote life. But there are programs and things that are existent, such as Saving Innocence, such as our specific units that are designed for it to address the needs of those youth. But it is a difficult task. I can recall one example, actually within the last about 3 years, in the Vermont Corridor office where I used to be regional administrator, a youth who could be at home with her dad. She was only about 15. She would come and go into the office, sometimes come in there to clean up and then come out, and you knew she was heading right back to the street just by what she was wearing. And she didn't have to be in that situation per se, but that is all she knew at this point in time, even though she was only 15. She had a loving father at home, that we managed to get her back to him for maybe 45 days. And then she was right back out there, unfortunately, doing what she was doing. And it's not, and I can't even act like I know what she's going through, what any of our youth are going through. That is not my experience. The trauma for me is not being able to reach them. But all I can do is continue to put forth the best effort I can. One of the mottos for my staff for me is make sure the reason a youth does or does not succeed is not because of your lack of effort. Just because you don't like something, just because you don't believe in something, you need to be able to address and deal with every situation, every youth. Beliefs might be different. They might be difficult, but just understanding there is some trauma, there was some abuse that they've gone through that you just don't understand, but your job is you're there to help them out. It's that simple. And sometimes that's pat on the back, sometimes it's tough love, so whatever way you need to engage them to try to reach them, keep trying something different until you can. But I can't sit here and tell you that I have an answer for that, except for that we have to keep trying to reach those youth.
And this is a question for all three of you. What do you think the system overall can be improved?
I don't want to be.
I know that's kind of a broad. Just in your opinion,
Yeah.
because you both have been through it. He works for DCFS.
I'm still in between sort of this reform and then this other side of we need to provide more of a community-based solution rather than giving this over to a system that has traditionally and historically harmed Black, Indigenous, low-income families. But it's difficult to be able to think that way because we don't have any sort of any type of programs to emulate right now that I know of. I'm still doing research, trying to understand in what ways can we provide funding, tangible resources, and change the ways in which that we cater to and meet the needs of low-income families of color without getting them ensnared in the foster system. To me, as I think time and time again about the young people that I speak with, a young person who was experiencing homelessness on a school campus, and the teacher found out, called DCFS. Now this young person was taken away from their family. Instead of getting resources, this young person was taken away from their family. And that happens time and time again. And so as I think about this, how can we keep families together? How can we give them the supports that they need without hanging this, we're going to take your child away if you don't do this? Or putting the white standard of parenting on the pedestal that Black families have to adhere to. In what ways can we think about child welfare differently? So those are the questions that I'm wrestling with in my PhD program as I'm trying to understand how it connects to educational outcomes. And I got to say, I don't have all the answers. But with these discussions, with these type of discussions, we're getting closer. And with more interrogation, with more research, we're going to get closer to providing these type of resources and solutions to these issues.
And that was really more of a question that you did leak for the Congresswoman. You have any thoughts, Tina?
I just want to say you did a great job answering that, DeMonte. I don't really have too many thoughts on how I can work on policy because I'm not really a policy person. I'm just going to give like examples of what I think would work more like on the hands-on approach. So for me, from my observation, providing, I think I said it already, wraparound services without, kind of like DeMonte said, without that hanging over their head, like, oh, the people are going to come. I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but without that hanging out over their heads. And I think with foundations like the Biddy Mason Foundation, other people that I've met here, maybe some other organizations that I remember supporting my mother, like Catholic Charities. Holman Church is one that she would get support from too as well. I think that's a lot of people go to that church here. I think using those resources in partnership with maybe DCFS or however they can do it, I think it helps because it provides a buffer. And it also establishes trust, because it's hard to trust someone who's employed by DCFS. Whereas you can build a community with someone like, for example, at the Biddy Mason Foundation, and you feel more of a sense of trust and community. Yeah.
Just real quick, you guys both hit on it. It's all about the community. We need more prevention services. Again, like I mentioned, we're a residual system, meaning something has to happen first. But something can still happen, but a family can then go to the community, whether it be a church, such as Holman, such as First and Me, or any of the churches within the 3FN network. It can be various agencies. You heard me mention the Right Way Foundation, Shields for Families, Friends of the Children. There's so many different resources out there. It's just a matter of being able to address them. And then one of you guys mentioned money. That's needed for the community, not for the department, for the community, so that mom and pop agencies that we've ever heard of can provide some of those services and prevention services to keep kids and families from coming to our attention in the first place. And then, of course, one of the things that we talked about a little bit up here as well is to continue to address the bias. Each one of us in this audience and across this land have bias. Sometimes we are harder on our own than other folks. And so we have to continue to address that internally as a department and as a community. And then there's also things such as volunteerism, cultural brokers. Some of you may have heard those terms, where folks come in to assist families, not getting paid. They're volunteers, but they need some money too. Getting volunteers to help that family navigate the systems. We have our parents in partnerships who are there to help families navigate the system so that the parents know what to expect. But again, because of funding, some of those things are going by the wayside. So between prevention, community, volunteerism, and then of course that the resources behind that in the form of legislation and money, all of that is necessary to continue to make the strides we have.
I think you were given cards as you came in today. Let's move into the Q&A. No? You got cards? Does that microphone work? I'm just going to... I'm going to grab your card. You didn't write it? Okay. All right. What's your question?
It's really for Radford. I'm actually a licensed psychologist, and I work with GMH, so we collaborate a lot. I work with the moms who have lost their children, so I work with them to get the kids back. But I found a lot of barriers, like you said, the bias that comes up with your staff. So what would you guide me specifically to do because it's really a big barrier where I have to get in lawyers and all of that. So what would you advise? Because I want to take it back to my other colleagues as well, because we all work with your team, for the moms.
A couple of different things. You can always go up the chain, of course. If you got to talk to the supervisor or the assistant regional administrator, so be it. But the first thing I would suggest is having that mom or dad call for a child and family team meeting. Any parent, even a youth, can ask for a child and family team meeting. And it can be to address visitation. It can be to address when are my kids going to come home? It can be to clarify what is it that I have to do to get that to take place. But that child and family team meeting can be requested. And if a worker tells you, no, we already have one, they can have another one. Okay, it can be done now. It might not be tomorrow like you want. It might have to be 3 weeks from now. But then they can include you or whoever they would like in that team meeting, because it is their meeting. That is what we like to call it, their meeting. Whereas before, back in those of you that remember points of engagement, it was us telling you who was going to be at that meeting, whether it was family prez, whether it was the pastor or whoever. But you can have auntie, grandma, the therapist, whoever you want in that meeting. Now, if you have an attorney, let us know, because we might have to have ours too. But you can call that meeting. You got to be prepared too.
Eugenia Wilson.
I am Eugenia Wilson with Living Advantage. And one of the comments that I have is that one of the things that can be done is that we need to also be sitting at the tables where they're making those choices and decisions about our children. You know, the probation department has meetings, and it's generally those that are within the department, you know, are within the court system. But we need more community members at the table to let them know, you know, what we will and will not stand for. And then if there's a problem, we need to also come in there with a solution. Now, my question for the department is, what is it that you all are doing for those that are transitioning out of the system to ensure, one, that they have their vital life documents that they need, their birth certificates, social security cards, their immunization records, to ensure that they have the paperwork that states they were in the system? What is taking place to ensure that that's there? And also, one of the things, I don't know if it's being thought of at this point in time, but it also should be that they have their credit check before they leave the system. Now, I can help you with all that too.
She will have her number on the table up here when you guys are exiting. Well, a social worker, that is part of what they're supposed to be doing. That's not new. It's not happening across the board all the time. Again, so what I'm going to say is that I'm speaking of what's supposed to happen. So as a community representative, as a therapist, as a aunt and uncle, as a kin provider, you have the birth certificate, social security card, all those things should be being acquired as soon as they come into our care. Even if they didn't have, say they weren't born at the hospital, they don't have a birth certificate, there is a process to acquire that. I've had to go, I can't remember what it is, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's been a long time. But it's a little bit more cumbersome. You have to get certain statements and what have you to make that happen. I think you gotta get two, but it can take place. Same thing with social security cards. If they're over 18, they might have to go with you to get that card, because we're not able to do that at that point in time. But they should have had that before then. Again, that's what should be taking place. And so a caregiver, holding a worker accountable, asking for that information is key to hold us accountable. There's nothing wrong with holding us accountable. And I'm expecting my workers to respond in kind in terms of doing what they need to do to acquire that. Now, as far as a credit check, that is something new that I believe is, I don't want to speak to that specific because I'm not sure. I know we've been talking about that more because fraud takes place. And so that is happening more frequently, I believe. But that's a new something that I've just heard about, I'm going to say in the last year, starting to take place. But I'm going to write that down too so I can go back and check on that one too. Okay.
Any more cards?
I have a question.
Yep, they got a question.
I have a question.
Oh.
I don't need
Well,
the microphone.
she's right here. I'm gonna hand you the mic.
Go
What's your name?
Latoya.
Latoya.
Hi. So I work with the Los Angeles Youth Commission. So a lot of things you guys were saying were kind of on point, but I kind of have a question on. I see that you guys acknowledge the problems, you see the problems, and my question is, why are we not engaging with the community enough? Because how she came with her programming, and basically she hit on the marker. Kids need their paperwork, kids need to know about their credit, they need to be ready to jump into the adult world. So I'm kind of saying, like, is it a way that we can all start partnering with these nonprofits and community-based organizations like now to make it to where when the kids are aging out And if they don't feel comfortable coming to their social workers and DCFS and every all the big dogs, they can come to the smaller places like the Right Way Foundation and get the hands-on experience to fill out the paperwork and understand what the caseload is, understand how to apply for AB 12 or how to even ask for it, because the disconnect we're having is the county organization you guys don't have enough staff that care. That actually want to sit down and hear what's the problem and figure out how to fix it. It's too much generalizing. Yep. You looking at it as, oh, you all have the same problem, and because you're in the system, you all are traumatized. No, every kid had a different experience. Every single kid. So I think it's kind of the point where we need to break it down and stop putting it in a big circle. It needs to be more dots, and all those dots get to the bigger circle. But the thing is, you guys created the bigger circle without the dots, and it's no connection. So I think as we're looking at everything, we need to start looking at, like how you say, it's up to the community. It's up to you guys too. Like it's like a partnership, like for everyone to be on the same page. So if the community is in and they see that, hey, they're supporting us too, we all on the same page. So that was like question and a comment.
I'm not sure the question. But what I will say is that you're correct. And like she said, you got to come with the solutions too. So you're on the Children's Commission. I'm sure you're giving recommendations. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to be over there next week. So again, and some of it is taking place. So if I don't know about you, I can't have my staff refer to you. And so many offices, especially if you're in a certain area, you can contact that office to get on the map, quote unquote. Meaning you can come to a general staff meeting. You can come and give a presentation. I always tell folks to have a one-page flyer, because if it's more than one page, folks ain't gonna look at it all the way through. And so that they will have that as a resource. And so we can start building up that resource base. It doesn't have to be the largest agencies in the world to provide services, as Latoya, I'm sorry, I apologize, as Latoya stated. So that is taking place in some regional offices. It is not necessarily some countywide coordinated effort. So that might have to take place, as you're suggesting. But on a smaller scale, we do have different mom and pop large agencies coming to the office. And some of them, you have them come annually because it's out of sight, out of mind. Not to mention turnover of social workers. I have 30 new workers. I need them to hear that information about her agency, about Franco's agency, about SHIELD, et cetera, et cetera. And so I agree with you 100%. We're starting to do it, but we're here. We're 10% of the way, and we need to keep it moving. So.
I want to touch on that as well. Something that I recognized after I emancipated out from care, my twin brother and I, after we graduated from Cal State Northridge, we realized that there weren't any supports for transition age youth. And so what we did was we were like, why can't we provide the support, right? We've been through the system, so we know what it's like, right? And oftentimes young people who have been through the system are not, as you mentioned, the dots are not being connected. They should be paid. They should be the first folks asked, what is it that you believe to be some of the solutions? How can we use your expertise, your lived experience expertise, to be able to provide recommendations? And so something that my brother and we created was a nonprofit called Twinspire, Together We Inspire. And it's a nonprofit that provides social justice training and financial empowerment and literacy training. And so we actually, in some cases, pay young people to go through our financial workshops, right? You can't tell young people to save their money if they don't have none. So all this financial literacy, we're going to do a budgeting workshop. I ain't got no money, bro. You talking about budgeting, right? And so we're like, we actually are going to pay you to attend, right? Learn and earn to be able to go through these workshops so you can be prepared for the next step. So you can, make the decisions now so you can get a house. No one's talking about this. I believe that when young people are in care, there needs to be some sort of savings, like a mandatory savings that goes into an account and it's invested on behalf of the young person. And when they emancipate, we got a lump sum. We got a fund where they can go out and make change and make a living, right? And so that's one recommendation that I will provide as well, but we'll talk further about that later on. Thank you.
Got a question in the back, but you're sitting on the edge of your chair, so I know whatever you're going to say is important, so I'm going to come back to you. Let me walk
I
around
don't need
here.
the microphone. I'm loud.
Can you hear?
Can y'all hear me?
Can you hear?
Is
Yeah.
that a microphone? Yeah. Vocal cords, you know. My name is Sky. I'm also a former foster youth and a doctoral candidate as well. I have a question, but it's kind of a solution in a way, but it's also addressing many things that people have already mentioned. So we know that the foster care experience is not a one-size-fits-all experience, and foster parents and social workers are not created equal. So my question really is, we have the infrastructure now. We have technology. Why don't we make an app or an online portal for foster youth to access all the resources that are currently available? Because as has been already mentioned, many of us didn't know about the resources. We have a closed mouth because we're not told that there's the Chafee Grant. We're not necessarily told that there's transitional housing. It took me years to find out about Biddy Mason Foundation. So why don't we make some sort of app? I don't know if the department could do this or if it would be an outside organization. Why isn't there some sort of website or app that all youth would have access to that has all of the resources there so that they automatically know, oh, look, I can get a free computer if I go to this resource. I can get a scholarship here. I can get textbooks here. Why doesn't that exist? And how can we make that exist? How can we make that happen is my question.
You need to be on this panel. Come on now. Round of applause. We appreciate you mentioning that. And just want to sort of do a shameless plug. There's an organization called Stepping Forward Los Angeles. They've created an app, right? And it's fairly new, but they created an app where young people can sort of, get into and they can sort of find their resources. My hope is that we have organizations and departments who can invest in that infrastructure where they started and be able to sort of maximize on that, where young people can put their zip code and say, oh, these are the resources around me, right? Or young people can, put education and they can see all the scholarships, or they put housing and they can see all the vouchers or the resources to get into low income housing or any resources available. And so as we begin to sort of think about that as something that we'd like to emulate, I'd love to see the department and love to hear your perspective on what would it take for us to be able to invest in that, and what would it take for young people to be a part of that conversation in the creation of that. Sorry to give you a question. I know we're panelists here.
All right, that's all right. Yeah, you have iFoster. That has a lot of that information. You have IOP Online that has a lot of the information she's referring to. But again, the word is not getting out, obviously. I got to apologize for your social workers. But the word is not getting out, obviously. So again, I've taken that note down as well. We have to make sure there's actually go around some of our staff who may not be, like she said, there's A and B and C work. Everybody's not the same. I call it A, B, and C workers. I don't go below C because that means you're failing. So we have to do a better job as a department to make sure that the word is getting out, that our social workers are sharing the information. I do believe we are learning from lived experience more so than we have in the past, for sure. You have on the Children's Commission, you have youth or former foster youth with lived experience that are helping to create policies and what have you. We're bringing them in for other panels and what have you as well. But again, like I said, we're about 10% of where we need to be in some of these areas. And like this young lady said, we need to make sure the word is getting out. But there are some things out there. I think it's just a matter of centralizing, maybe doing it better from somebody from outside coming in to support that effort. But we definitely need to get the word out in a way that reaches all of our youth.
I just wanted to add, could we possibly look into, we as in all of us, working with 211, because 211 already has a lot of the resources and the infrastructure. I've used 211 before. I know a lot of other people have, and asking them, what do they recommend?
Right. I've actually worked with them in the past. Actually, I think they're doing it differently than they used to before. Used to give out a CD every year, way back in the day. But again, building off of their experience and expertise in the area to bring this all together is a good idea. So again, there's a lot of resource out there. It's just a matter of making sure it gets into the right people's hands.
211, everyone knows about it. So it's obviously, well, a good majority knows. So it's a 211 is a is a hotline, and it also has an app and a website that has a compilation of all of the resources available in LA County. So if you need housing assistance, you need food, you can call from a payphone and call 211. You can go to the website. And they also have workshops where they come out to schools. If you ever contact them and you need them to come to your organization to give a workshop, they send out representatives. So it's a great program. And as I was saying, there's an infrastructure where they're already able to text responses. They have employees who are trained, have a great rate of assistance, I guess. When you call, you are able to get what you need. So possibly that can help in our situation, because a lot of the youth are saying that they're not directed or they're not aware of what they need.
Come on now, because I'm trying to be nice. But hey, everyone, I'm Alexis. And if you don't know me, you will. And so I just wanted to, I heard you guys say a lot of great things, community building, different things. The youth commission is here. It's not that hard to become a verified vendor with LA County as well. And it's 100% free. I'm a verified vendor. You can go into these group homes and different things and, really talk about what's important in our life. Also, I heard it being danced around a little bit, but I haven't really heard advocacy. Yes, the youth commission is here, but I haven't heard the straight out word advocacy. We need more foster youth and more people to have and give advocacy and show people the importance of advocacy. I know that DeMonte and Yadi, they're both a little bit older, but CYC is here and me too. So if you haven't heard of CYC, definitely check out California Youth Connection. And, they've been the pioneers. And I don't know if you guys heard about the foster youth stimulus check, about the AB 12, extended foster care, so on and so forth. So, we have to get people excited about advocacy. It wasn't a question, more public comment, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alexis.
Glad to see that CYC is still around.
Let's get Gary in. The mic, Gary.
Hello. In my law practice, I've represented kids charged with crimes, delinquency, and kids taken out of their home. And one aspect in talking with colleagues of mine is the issue of police showing up in situations where there's a problem and a possibility that a child will be removed. And I'm just wondering if you all have, and actually I was hoping Congresswoman Bass was here to talk about it in aspects of being mayor of Los Angeles. Alternatives to having police show up when a child's being removed. It just adds more trauma to the situation and increases the possibility of the trauma to both the whole family, really.
Right. So the police don't actually always show up. I've unfortunately had to detain from families, and the police were not called. I had to navigate the situation, even though it can get volatile. And how I handle it might be different than somebody else. Might handle it better than me. But the police are not called on a regular basis necessarily for detention. There are times when we do, and when they come, many times they will be in the background. It's really just a suppression thing to try to quote unquote keep the peace, but they're really trying to stay out of it. However, it can exacerbate the situation with their presence being there. But the police are not, I'm gonna say it's less than 15%. It's probably significantly lower than that, where the police are actually involved, but I don't know the actual number. But unfortunately, yes, sometimes their presence, depending on the situation, can work both ways, suppress the situation and or exacerbate.
Any more questions?
I just want to have a comment. I think that we also have to just keep it in perspective of social workers have a hard job.
Right.
Although I'm not a social worker, I collaborate a lot with that department. And so they do have to make judgment calls at the end of the day, right? And so the goal is to protect children. I see the cases, I know details of the cases. So it can be a hard job, right? And sometimes it's not always they don't want to do the job, or they're intentionally trying to deprive the child from whatever services, right? So it's just also, it's not necessarily the bash of social workers, but some of them do a good job and some struggle, right? At the end of the day. But they have a hard job. I read the cases, some of them have been incarcerated, I read those cases. So it's very difficult, right? It's a complex issue. It's not so much all on the social workers. As everyone mentioned, it's a community involvement. social worker involved, DCFS involved. It's a complex issue. And it's going to take more than just, the DCFS issue X, Y, Z, because even if they did that, what's the outcomes of our foster youth? Are they still thriving? Right? And those are discussions I feel like we need to have more of. Well, how can we get them to be thriving? Right? How do we get them into college? We still have the lowest rates in terms of like getting educated. What are the barriers for that? We don't discuss mental health. I know everyone doesn't have a mental health issue, but majority do at the end of the day. We're taking out of home. We have a lot to deal with. And for myself, I have shared experience, right? I knew of the resources. I had IOP. I went to college, but I dropped out. Because I was struggling with depression. No one mentioned depression. No one let me know about mental health. Nothing, right? I just struggled. And so I dropped out in undergrad. It wasn't 2 years later I got back into school and got my master's and doctorate degree. But again, those moments, like we need to have more discussions like that. Let's get them thriving. Let's get them educated. Let's get them sitting at the table. Right? At the end of the day, your title, your credentials behind you sits you at the table. Let's be real. Right. That's what set me at table. Not because I had a shared experience.
I have a follow-up question from that. You brought up a lot of great points about social workers, and some of them are being burnt out on their caseload, and they're dealing with so much. How are social workers being supported right now?
Okay, so that's a good question too. One of my first speeches with my staff when they come to my office, especially when they're new, is to make sure you have outlets outside of our department. Whether that be family, in my case, it's now golf. Call me bougie if you want to, but I don't pull muscles playing golf or playing the intramural basketball and softball, getting hurt all the time. But you got to have outlets and then support one another. We do have peer mentoring as well for the social workers that is available to them. Each office has what we call some peer champions. We're able to give them resources, whether it be employee assistance program, whether it be referring to counseling, et cetera. However, I'm not sure how many are taking advantage of it. But it is a difficult job, as you said. I don't know, you're probably not doing enough. But there are a few things out there now. Again, when I was coming up, none of that stuff was available to us as social workers. But there are a few things now where we're trying to be more understanding of that, knowing that these decisions are difficult to make, as you guys have stated. That's where the teaming aspect of things comes into play. Having caregivers, having the youth at the table, having family at the table, the community at the table to help us make some of those decisions so it does not fall solely on that social worker. And I used to have to tell some of them, use your supports. You don't have to make these decisions in a vacuum, but they have to be willing to do so. Some folks don't want to give up that control. And that's a problem in itself as well. And so those are just some of the avenues and different ways that we're trying to support the workers in a better way than we used to. But again, still work to be done in that aspect as well.
Got a question from this young lady right here. What's your name? Mariah.
Hi, I'm Mariah. I'm currently in foster care right now, and I live in a group home with Miss Lori Dangerfield. And I want to know, how can we get more, people advocating for us? Because a lot of people, they don't like to deal with us. It's like, we ask them for something, and they'll be like, okay, we'll get it for you. And months, weeks, and pretty much years go by. Yep. So we need more people advocating for us. How can we have that happen?
Yup. Okay.
That's a good question.
Yep.
Well, you have a lot of folks in this room that are advocates. The gentleman in front of you is someone I've known for several years. He is an advocate. No, I'm not talking about Frank. I'm about Dwayne right there. Dwayne was one of my youth. He is now advocating, trying to give back, mentoring, trying to start THPs and stuff. He's lived experience, and what he can do, I would never be able to do. You have other community partners that are stepping up, and we just have to make sure we're bringing them to the table as well to advocate for you. And so that we're working together, not like this. Again, it takes a village. We can't do it all ourselves. I see your hand, or Mr. Bench, that's an advocate right there. You have parents and partners. You have a bunch of different advocates. Folks, as a department, we just have to make sure we're willing to listen and take in those suggestions, not just in a cursory manner. We had a work group and we listened to you, but actually do what we need to do. in terms of trying to implement some of those things, working through the barriers, around the barriers that exist, so that we can make these things happen. Easier said than done, but we're gonna keep working.
She has a follow up.
There's one thing I want to mention. I think sometimes it's like the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And so what I hear you saying is that, hey, we over here, don't forget about us. And in some ways, it takes organizations like California Youth Connection to actually say, hey, we need your voice. And there are opportunities where you can get involved with different places where they have different groups across the state. And I think now they're maximizing sort of nationally, right? They're sort of having a national impact. And there was a program that they had where they had Indigenous and Black youth who were in group homes, and they got together week by week, and they talked about these things. They held each other accountable and came up with sort of policy recommendations, and they presented all of that. At the end of the 8 to 9 months, they presented those findings to lawyers who can be able to sort of go out and advocate for them. So there are ways that you can get involved. But one thing that I don't want to sort of like push you toward is that oftentimes young people who are in these systems, we put a lot of pressure on you to say, you fix it, right? You get involved. You be the squeaky wheel. But the system is just being the system. And all of the outcomes that we see are happening. And some say it's happening on accident. Others say it's happening on purpose. The system is designed and it's producing what it does. And so we have to be intentional about the ways in which that we get involved, right? So I'm not going to tell you to get involved just to get involved at involvement's sake. But I want you to be intentional about the time in which you put into these organizations, but some who have been historically successful with advocating on behalf of foster youth, young people who are in juvenile justice systems. They call it justice systems, but, the criminalization system and foster care. So just wanted to make sure I plug that.
I just want to say, I'm so proud of you for speaking up, and don't stop doing that.
Out of curiosity, what is she trying to get? Nobody can help. Nobody knows.
You want to answer that?
Yeah. So me, I like to ask. Because you're not gonna get anything done if you don't ask.
Right.
So I always like to ask. I'll encourage. The other girls. Don't say, "Oh, I need this." Okay, you can ask them. There's always you can always get something if you ask. Even if it takes, keep telling, keep pushing it. Even if it's not happening right now, it's gonna happen. But we just need more people who care, enough to deal with us, because there's not a lot of people who, are entirely caring for us.
Give a round of applause. But what I hear you saying is that having caring staff and sort of supportive adults in that environment, in the transition while you all are there, is significant to improving your experience. Is that what I hear you saying? That supportive staff and caring staff?
Yeah, so we know we're not alone.
Got you. Yep. So we know we're not alone. Thank you.
Could there be some kind of blowback in a situation where they reach out to any one of these organizations?
No, it's true. Sometimes when we're in the system and we speak up for ourselves, we do face repercussions. We do face people being more harder on us and putting extra barriers on us. And that's a scary thing. But just like she said, don't ever lose your voice, because your voice matters and your voice will make a difference, whether there was kind of a bad outcome that shouldn't have happened. But know that there are advocates like Public Counsel and Alliance for Children's Rights who have pro bono legal free attorneys for youth in foster care and those in group homes that are there to protect your rights. Because I've experienced some repercussions when I was in the system and I was overlooked, and I went to some of these team decision meetings and oh my God, everybody's like yelling at each other and me in the background like feeling invisible. But there are people who care. There's a lot of people here who care about you, and I care about you because I know what it's like to feel alone and not have somebody validate what I'm going through. But know that organizations like that, which I'm more than happy to connect you to, are there to protect you and any legal issue that you're going through, or you, even if you're not sure, if you want to just talk to somebody, I'm more than happy to support you with that.
I'm here too.
We're here for you. You're loved.
No, I'm always here.
Me too, because if somebody starts to retaliate against you, please take it up the chain. That's not okay. Y'all about to get me upset. That is not okay. Again, I'm gonna freely speak for my colleagues that are over particular offices. If you're bringing that to somebody's attention, the worker will be held accountable. It is not okay to let things linger on for months. It's not okay, especially to retaliate or to treat you differently because you made a statement or because you asked for something and you're quote unquote getting on somebody's nerves. That's not the point. Get informed then, or let them know what the progress is. Keep them filled in on what's going on. This job is hard, don't get me wrong, but it ain't rocket science.
Right.
It is hard. But if you put forth the effort that is required, you can get some outcomes. I'm not going to be able to reach every youth. Sometimes you're not ready. Sometimes I'm not saying the right thing. However, the effort has to be there. So again, I keep speaking up for yourself. And you know, well, I know you know, because yeah, you done called our office a couple times. Just advocate for yourself and keep speaking up.
You got a comment?
Follow-up question.
A question?
It's kind of related to other things that were mentioned. So earlier we talked a little bit about how being a former foster youth, it comes with stigma. Being in the system comes with stigma. My question is, and I'm not sure if this is in the jurisdiction of the department or the courts or how they're interrelated and how they could possibly fix this. Why is it that the verification paperwork uses the terms ward and dependent interchangeably when those are two separate things? Ward places blame on the child, whereas dependent shows the child is not at fault. The child is being removed due to neglect, abuse, whatever else it may be. So can we get the paperwork changed? Because that's only adding to the stigma if people look at us like we are criminalized already just because the verbiage on the paperwork does that to us. How can we change that? Good question.
So yeah, that's above my pay grade. I will have to pass that on to our attorneys in the court, but I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, that should be a simple thing. However, I hesitate in saying that. So I will, I'm taking that note as well. I will take that back to, matter of fact, my boss is one of the attorneys that probably deals with some of that stuff. So I will bring that to our attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. Any more comments, questions?
There's a question here, right here, woman in the glasses. Before you get to her, I wanted to say that also we have to really interrogate the portrayal of foster youth in the media, right? And so there's a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows that show foster youth as, they always sort of do this killing spree, and then they look back at the character development of the young person, and they say, oh, he was in foster care. And so what you're portraying is that for young people, it leads to this. And so I appreciate someone calling us out that, and I think it was Alexis earlier. She said, they are cool. They've been through the system, but they old. I just turned 30, right? So if you call that old, I'm old. But there are young people who are currently in the system who need to be in this chair. And I implore, right, that for organizations who are willing and able to do this work, to encourage young people to be involved and engage in this type of work rather than cherry picking young people who have been in the system years ago. Now that things have changed, this system is ever changing, and it's inextricably connected to a lot of other systems as well. And in some ways, we have to interrogate it in new and creative ways from new and creative folks, not the people who have been there, done that way long time ago. Right. So I appreciate that. Alexis, she's left now, but I'm glad that she mentioned that.
Next, Amanda.
Let me just have one shameless plug. Our scholarships are open now. They close on June 1st. For those of you who are in school and you need help, go online, www.biddymason.com, and apply for your scholarship. These are both two of our recipients. Okay?
Got a question over here.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you, the panel, and whoever put this on today. You've done an excellent job. I appreciate it. I'm a firm believer that knowledge is power. And if we don't have the knowledge, then we don't have the power to affect change. With that being said, my question is, as a registered voter, day-to-day citizen that I am, recently retired, what can I do specifically? I've heard a lot of things. We need the community to be involved. We need this to happen. What specifically can I do as an everyday citizen to affect change in the foster care system? That's part one, part A. Part B of my question is there anything that we as a community can do on the front end? You said, I heard someone say that foster care is reciprocal or residual. I think is the word that you use, residual. You're reactive. You have to wait for something to happen first. How do we get out front? How do we be proactive as a community to tackle some or all of the issues surrounding foster care? We may not fix it all, but maybe just one at a time. Thank you.
All righty. You said you registered? Vote. Vote for when these things come up that can benefit foster youth and the system. Number 2, volunteer, since I'm on the V's right now. There's all kinds of volunteer opportunities. Specifically, we have cultural brokers. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. That the 3FN network is part of. That's Biddy Mason is included in that, along with Holman. Now, see Nancy Harris, the president of that organization, is in the back. Cultural brokers. We actually stole that from the county of Fresno. And these are former teachers, lawyers, principals, foster parents who want to give back, basically. They want to support a family, a mom, a dad, a family through the system. Again, by holding them accountable and supporting them through what they're doing, as well as holding the department accountable. Knowing what is to be expected, knowing what we can do. Matter of fact, you would be a good one. I mean, we need to talk after this. So, and it does work. We don't necessarily have a lot of specific, I'm gonna call it quantitative data, but there's a lot of qualitative data, meaning stories about how they help a family get their children back, stories of how they help someone keep their children, stories about knowing that the lack of education was a barrier for this parent. I'm thinking of one in particular, mother. And then her cultural broker happened to be a former principal. So she helped her walk through that situation to get her diploma. That in itself made her feel better. Her self-esteem went up and the kids could feel that, her teenage sons. So there are opportunities such as that. There are other, the care portal. There's other opportunities where, in particular, our faith-based community has stepped up, at least in SPA 6. SPA 6 is Vermont Corridor office, the Compton office, the Waterbridge office, and the Hawthorne office. That's basically all around South LA. The faith-based community has stepped up to give in-kind services, food, clothing, etc. We have a care portal in which a family comes to our attention and they need, more recently, for lack of a better term, they are basically exterminated a person's house. Help them clean it up as well with the clutter. And that wasn't the department, that was the community stepping up, and that prevented us from having to detain the youth. We really are going to detain these days anyway. For poverty, in terms of a dirty house, not having something, there's too many resources out there that can be accessed to get them what they need through that situation. But the issue is, we've got to get to the underlying issue as to why they got to that situation. And sometimes that's where a cultural broker or an advocate, a clergy, or someone else can assist us with that.
So is this cultural broker? Can I go onto your website and find information about that?
You can talk to the lady right behind you, and the website is coming. It's not quite there yet now. For that cultural broker situation, it is a volunteer situation. So of course, what with that L word, live scan, background check has to be done. And there's classes. It's been what's the term? Centralized, so to speak, where there is a 3-day process, 2.5 days of training for that. So you know what's going on in the system, so that you know about trauma, so that you know about bias in particular. Because again, the cultural broker program was brought up as a result of the ERDD efforts within our department. It was specifically brought up to help African-American families. Does that mean that someone else can't benefit from it? No, but it was specifically for African Americans. That's what it was brought up for. So again, you're looking at two folks in the back. They can give it. He giving you her card right now. That's Reverend Bowie. He is actually one of our original cultural brokers from several years ago. And now we kind of restarted that program. I'll say rebooted it. But there are definitely volunteer opportunities and different things that the community can do to support the youth and families.
Can I say something?
Sure you can.
Are there any college programs or mentorship programs for former foster youth to become social workers? I'm aware of one with USC. I don't know if they target former foster youth, but they provide a fully funded scholarship if you commit to working for Children and Family Services, I believe.
I think what you're referring to is, the Inter-University Consortium. I'm with DCFS because of that. I was supposed to do 1 year, and that's back when school was, UCLA was $4,500 a year. Now it's about $30,000 a year. So I got a $15,000 scholarship, and I owe them 1 year after that. So that does still exist. I don't know what the money is for it now. I'm sure it's more than $15,000 now. It's 18 now. So it's there. I don't know about specifically for former foster youth, but there are a number of schools, Cal State, Northridge, Fullerton, USC, UCLA, Long Beach, all of the local schools. Started out with 5, now it's probably like 9 or 10 that do that. And it's either the Inter-University Consortium, they also had a thing called CalSWEC, which means you didn't necessarily have to work for the department, you just had to work with children in some form or another throughout the state. So there's programs out there, CalSWEC and the Inter-University Consortium. That was part of trying to quote unquote professionalize the system a little bit and bring in master's level, but it's also I don't know if BSW, to tell you the truth, qualified, but I knew it did for master's level, but I can't speak to the bachelor's portion. It's only MSW. Yeah.
Another question over here, our sound engineer.
Hi, I am former foster youth as well, and I currently go to Cal State Long Beach. But my question is regarding a situation that every foster kid experiences, even with the case with Gabriel Fernandez, if you know.
Right.
And now that the Roe versus Wade decision is now coming to light and it might eventually be overturned, my question is, what is the system looking like with overcrowding now because of the potential mothers giving up their child because they can't have an abortion?
Good question. Such a good question.
I have no idea. I don't know. I'm to tell you the truth. I don't. Could it increase? Yes, it could. There's a parent can relinquish a child, or I forgot the term, voluntarily relinquish a child. You can go to a fire department, police station. If you don't want the child, you don't have to have an abortion. So there's different options. It does not happen that often, and when it does happen, that mom or dad, and usually it is a female, in my experiences, you have to meet with them 2 to 3 times because you don't want somebody making a snapshot decision. So there's an option for relinquishment now that they can go through, but could that potentially increase with overturning Roe versus Wade? Absolutely. Or you can have kids trying to make it out of state to go to somewhere that does. Actually, California is the state I think that is going to allow it still. But it could be other kids coming from other states to do that. So it could have an impact. I myself, based on relinquishments, don't think it's going to have a significant increase, but I really don't know because that was not something that kids were relinquishing for. But could it have an impact? Yes.
Got a follow-up comment or question?
Hey, so it's for Mr. Carter. I just want to let you guys know that I graduated from Cal State LA. It's okay to applaud for me. Thank you. But I just wanted to say that when I did that, it was like very hush-hush that the Bachelor's of Social Work students at Cal State Long Beach were getting paid the CalSWEC. And though I know that that's not coming from you guys or whatever, I really do ask that you guys become transparent in those things because foster youth need help. And when I, as a social work major who took the oath, who believes in our ethics, went and said something about that, they turned it on me and told me if it was all about the money, then I shouldn't have gone into social work. And so I'm asking you to like somehow figure out how to get more information about that to people who need it, us foster youth who know both sides of the system. I speak dual languages when it comes to foster care because I'm a social worker and a foster youth. And so please, please, please make that available because there's so many barriers that stop foster youth from going to school, and just having tuition is not enough.
Right. Yep.
Thank you,
I will
Alexis.
do that.
I just wanted to make one last comment. Besides the name of Eugenia Wilson, Living Advantage, we service foster youth throughout the LA County. I want to commend the speakers, Miss Jackie, the Biddy Mason. This is such a great opportunity, and what's so unique about this is that we're actually having an open and honest conversation. Most times I'll go somewhere and the panel will speak, and then you leave the audience with questions that are never answered or places that they can go to get what it is that they need. This is what we need more of, where we can actually speak. And I mean, you handle this so well. I think I'm gonna bring you some more water. I mean, you're just smooth with it. And you accept and receive as we do, because we know it's not the easiest thing. Because I believe all of us somewhere in here are raising other people's children, and it's best that we do it to the best of our ability. Amen. Because it is our future. But I just want to commend it because I think it's such a beautiful thing to have this open conversation like this and be able to speak and to actually get some honest answers. Again, thank you all.
Thank you.
What are we doing for foster youth with disabilities? Because, and this was reported by NFYI, I guess last year, but it's no longer on the website. About 25% of former foster youth have a documented disability, whether it be mental or physical. And I've seen other papers that say it's anywhere between 13 to 17%. But especially when we're talking about higher education, I myself live with several invisible disabilities. And I have about $400K in student loan debt because I exhausted all of the funds I could possibly get. I had the Chafee, I had Biddy Mason scholarship, I have everything, and yet I still have all this debt. And so I know about the Mental Health Services Act, and I know about the stipend specifically for mental health providers because I am a therapist, but you have to be full-time. There's an exception for former foster youth, but you still have to work full-time. I cannot work full-time with the conditions that I have, so therefore I do not qualify for any of that support. So what can we do to help bridge these gaps and help former foster youth with disabilities? And my research, my dissertation is looking at trauma and health. And I would say anywhere between 60 to 80% of the youth that participate in my study have PTSD. So what can we do to actually help? Because there's several undiagnosed, untreated mental health issues as well as physical health issues. I had so many of the youth participating in my study talk about back pain, stomach pain, sleep issues, feeling tired, dental issues. What are we doing to help them is my question.
Well, y'all don't ask me these questions. I'm trying to not get too micro with it, what you asked, because you asked on a kind of a global level. Because there are things that are taking place, linkages to services and what have you, to help youth that are in our care. Whether it be linking with regional center, whether it be linking with other mental health facilities, or agencies that State Department of Mental Health, for example, us holding each other accountable to make sure certain things are taking place. We have educational liaisons who are there to help that we didn't have before, that can help navigate some of those systems, to make sure youth with IEPs or different disabilities receive their services. But I think you're talking about on a large scale than that. I think it's just going to be, again, having these things like this, because I can't answer that question, honestly speaking. I'm sorry, but bringing the right folks to the table, from academia, from mental health, from DCFS, as well as those from the board or wherever that can fund certain things to make sure these services are being, these needs are being addressed. But I think that's probably a work in progress. And I can't really speak more intelligibly to that. I apologize. But on the micro level, there are some things that are taking place that are more of a support for those youth while they're in their care. But even that, is lacking. You can't always get the services you need. There's limited resources. That's really a huge work in progress.
There's one thing.
But you said in your PhD?
PsyD.
PsyD.
Mhm.
So so you're gonna give us some solutions that we can work on?
I hope so.
All right.
I just hope people will listen.
I'll listen.
That's why I hope people will care.
Absolutely.
Because we're so many of us have so many debilitating physical health issues because of all the trauma we've been through, because of all the neglect, and then having social workers that didn't help us.
So if you can come up with, and this is my wishful thinking, if you can come up with some treatment modalities that will assist us, I'm saying us as a department, but mental health, and be able to address or reach some of the trauma. Yes, you said that. It's kind of like the question, some of the questions. It's hard to reach that trauma to help that person, parent or youth, be able to accept and or engage, or we just don't have the wherewithal to do it. You just said that I don't even know the question. It's just that there's so many needs in that mental health realm, as well as disability realm, that we just have not been able to address.
Well, it's also funding because we're promised Medi-Cal until 26, but some of us lose it, and then we still need health insurance, and then Medi-Cal isn't covering dental. We're having to pay for crowns. I mean, someone in my study said they have a partial plate, and everyone in my study, I have 55 former foster youth who participated between the ages of 18 to 35. So that's very young to have dentures. And it's because of all the neglect and all the trauma we've been through. We need funding and we need other resources to help us desperately. I've created a group, Purpose Through Pain, that I've offered to, I work for Peace Over Violence, which is a nonprofit that serves domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. So I've created a group specifically for survivors who also have chronic health conditions. And I have a list of resources that I provide all of my participants and my clients, but that's not enough. We need funding and we need a lot of other things as well.
Yeah, that again, way above my pay grade, and that's not even a DCFS thing. That's just national.
It is. That's why I'm sad.
Yes, ma'am.
Karen Bass isn't here. Congresswoman isn't here
Let me
anymore.
interrupt you, Scott, for just a second. Let's get together next week or the week after and talk about
a relationship the Biddy Mason Charitable Foundation has with the provider, and see if there is a way that something can be done. Because I agree with you. If you haven't had dental care at 26, you could have a horrendous situation on your hands. But this provider says that they want to help foster youth. So let's put their feet to the fire and see if they really do.
Amen.
Yeah. We want to do this on an ongoing basis because we feel that the situation will never change if the public's not educated. So we see this as a first step. So thank you all for coming. Please come inside and cool off.
Well, thank you to our panel. You guys were incredible. Reggie Carter, DeMonte Thompson, Yatina Soto, and Congresswoman Bass, who had to leave a little earlier. I want to thank all four of you for joining us today and spending the afternoon with us today. Thank you again, Jackie Broxton, and also to Eleanor and Cornelius Lee for putting this entire event together. I'm Frankie Ross. Once again, thank you for your time. And it was a pleasure. And hey, enjoy your afternoon.